I think I'm live now. Just a second. Hello. Yep, it's working fine. Just if I can open the stream. Yeah, yeah. Okay. I think chat's working fine. If I can just share my screen. I think it's working fine. Just if I can have a bit of a look, the stream's working fine. I think the video quality is also fine finally today. Yep. Chat's working fine. Much of a lag. But yeah. Think a small bit of lag. Apart from that, it's very much fine. Not much issues going on. So okay, without any further delay, let's get started then. So hello everyone, welcome back to the stream. And today here we are with the West Asia special. And before starting, just a small disclaimer. I'm not a geopolitical expert. I'm just someone who loves to talk about geopolitics. And here I am for the love of the game. So, without any further delay, let's get started with the Middle East as an area, how the things I would say have evolved in the past, and why we are finally here where we are. So, if I can just have a quick photo for the image. Second, I think finally today the chat's working well and fine. The video's quality is also not lagging today. I did a couple of changes, so yeah, it's good enough quality. So, so yeah, starting with the topic, the area of Middle East has have had, I would say, its issues since millennia. The issue has been going on since a long time. The things have been evolving, things have been changing, and the chaos has been erupting across the, I would say, globe since a couple of years. The way West Asia got established, the dominance of the British in the post pre World War era, and then the fall of Ottoman Empire somewhere around in the case of Turkey, and then the new boundaries drawn. That's new boundaries which came to be established. It became a tussle point in the future end, and that's how I would say the main issue came to light. When the Ottoman Empire, which was somewhere around the case of Turkey, extending all the way around here, it finally fell down, and then British started to carve down the entire landscape. The way the borders were distributed, the way the distribution happened, it was not for the sake of the country and the men and the people which were living here. Rather, it for the sake of a future end, which the British powers wanted to have in their own hand. And that's how the situation had evolved. The biggest thing which happened in this particular area of Middle East was the discovery of oil. When oil was finally discovered in the region of Saudi Arabia, that's where some of the big changes came to happen in this area. One of the biggest reason why Germany lost the World War II was that oil was found by the Britishers, by the USA, much quicker, I would say, as compared to Germany able to utilize the oil. And oil was the reason which helped them much more in the initial stages of the World War II and also later on then in the further progress. So if I have to give a bit of a history, because like I said, this particular topic is somewhat like of a history lesson. The current issue that we see in the today's era, it's something to do with how things evolved in the past. And to give a starter, 1930 is basically where our story starts. So as of now, at that time, USA did not had much presence in this particular area. The way the presence we see right now, the presence is right now seeing, that's something which did not existed way back then. 1930, however, things started to change. So 1930s, not much US presence in this area. 1930 something changed. A California based company, California based company, they started to see some opportunities in Saudi Arabia, and they requested the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to provide them some lease, some I would say areas for mining the crude oil reserves. But the thing in the case of Saudi exists here, and the way the royal family also was a huge patronized, I would say, towards the case of religion. It was seen a big gamble for the royal kingdom to provide rights in the Saudi area to the US. The West was seen, I would say, kind of an anti when it came to the case of religion. But however, seeing the benefits of the prophet, maybe in 1930 around, the deal started, and then finally in 1938, the California-based company found oil in Tehran. Tehran is a particular area in Saudi Arabia. If I can locate somewhere by the help of this map, D Tehran, Saudi Arabia. So this is where ultimately, initially, US and oil, the California-based company which came here, finally stuck oil here, and that's where the thing started to change a lot. In the 1940s, USA then started to build small cities. The US built small cities and township area in this particular region so as to uh, carry on the progress of oil and to take on the benefits they can. And that's where I would say things started to change a bit. Saudi people personally didn't like this new friendship, the religion angle, like I mentioned. But the kings and the Saudi princes, what they saw was prophets, and and that's how the thing started to evolve. And at the time, the religion angle, somewhere or the other, was, I would say, ignored. And USA got its first ever military operation in this area of Tehran. They were able to get an airstrip built up here, and that's how the presence of USA in the Middle East started to build up. So if I can make a poster here, US presence in Middle East. This is basically a history, I would say, of how US came to exist in the Middle East and how the chaos started to build up in the long run. Now coming to the case of this particular angle of construction. So most of my, I would say, research angle has been taken from the couple of videos in the YouTube which I watched and the overall preparation from UP cycle. So I'm trying my best, I would say, not to give any wrong facts here. So yeah, just a small disclaimer once again. Not a geopolitical expert, just someone who knows and loves to talk about geopolitics. Here are two things I would say which now started to came in line. Firstly, The construction company which helped USA in Saudi Arabia, they were basically family of Osama bin Laden. So Osama bin Laden's father, he was a rich guy who was in the construction business, and that's how initially I would say the influence and the role, and I would say a presence of Osama bin Laden starts to appear in the US and Saudi friendship. And the thing which was seen wrong by him and Saudi people was that no external presence of a foreign country should be in this particular region, because it was seen as against the way of Islam and the religion happened. They wanted to have an area where the policies and the affair are controlled by the people within the country and not from some outside influence. At that same time, Soviet Union had been also increasing their influence in somewhere or the area of Afghanistan also. And even the way the Afghanistan build-up was happening, the fights were taking place, the Mujahideens which were cropping up there, somewhere or the other, the angle of Osama bin Laden started to appear slowly and slowly, because Osama bin Laden did not wanted to have any superpower in this region. He was against USA, he was against USSR, and he had started to fight against the Afghans. He started to fight against them in the Afghan area. So that's what I wanted to mention for the initial case of how the angle of Osama bin Laden, the construction part, and the religion angle started to build up slowly and slowly. Because what these people used to see was that the ancient holy land of Saudi Arabia, that's being, I would say, deteriorated or misaligned by the case of USA. Just a second. Okay. So that's how the initial angle, I would say, of Saudi Arabia came about, and the case of Afghanistan, the Mujahideen's presence. So if I can mention this particular case here, Afghanistan at that time was trying to be controlled by USSR, and to float and to avoid that happening, the USA initially started supporting the Mujahideens in Afghan, and Osama bin Laden was part of the same. So that's how initially the presence of USA and the other superpowers started to build up in this particular area of West Asia. That's the element of Saudi Arabia, and that's the element of form. Just if I can, Saudi, Afghan, Israel, and then the Iran case. So that's the initial, I would say. And coming to the case of then Israel. So, like I mentioned in the past videos also, the thing about Israel is, after the persecution which happened in the case of Jews, and finally a particular land area had to be provided to the case of Israel's, the land which was chosen to be given to them was this particular area of Jerusalem, where already Palestinians were living. The 1948 UN declaration that this particular agreement would happen about, and it was in build up to the Balfour Declaration and the Peel Commission guidelines which had happened in the previous time, and that's how Israel's happened. And the creation of Israel was seen in two angles, I would say. One was the Western influence and presence in a Islamic dominated world, and the lobbying angle. The Israeli people, the Jewish people, they are very much well educated people. And that was one of the biggest reasons they were, I would say, somewhat they were able to provide money funding in the parliament, in the Senate and the Congress of USA. And that's how the initial lobbying and the initial influence of Israel has always been of a presence in the case of USA. That's the case for Israel. Then the element of Iran, how the USA presence had happened here. So Iran's regime change, it was initially a democratically elected government, that particular democratic was not seen, I would say, in coherence to the case of USA. It was more aligned towards the USSR, and that particular person had started to nationalize the oil fields of Iran at that time. So to have a stakehold in the oils of Iran and had to have their own, I would say, hegemony, democratically elected press was removed by USA CII and the UK's MI6. He was replaced by the Shah of Iran, the Reza Shah Pahlavi. We all know what happened then. The way the Shah of Iran started to liberalize and add the elements of westernization in the country of Iran, it was seen very much against the principles of Shia communities, the Islamic regimes, and the Islamic, I would say, world. And once again, then the chaos built it up, and it led to Islamic revolution and the supreme leader concept, the cleric supreme leader concept, and the Sunni dominance, sorry, the Shia dominance in Iran with respect to the clergy and government started to build up. So that's how the presence initially of USA in this particular region looks like. In Saudi, it was for the presence of the oil. In the case of Afghanistan, it was for the case of countering the USSR, the support to the Mujahideens. In the case of Israel, it was for the lobbying element and then having their presence in that particular area. And then in the case of Iran, it was initially because they had their influence in the form of a president, which was removed, and then the Shah of Iran came. And then the issue of supreme leader, because as soon as the supreme leader and the Shia dominance began in Iran, they were not at very good terms with the Americans. The condition of hostages happened. Some of the American diplomats were kept as hostage, and that's how the condition started to deteriorate. So that's how I would say initially the 1930 to 1979. That's how the initial build-up of the US presence in the Middle East, especially Saudi, Afghanistan, Israel, and Iran, started to build about. Coming now to once again further how things evolved. So, if I have to, I would say build up the case of. Yeah, I think I can just shortly discuss the case of USA more only here. USA's influence and the build up to 9/11, because that's, I would say, how the story evolved and things started to build up ahead, and that's the reason why all the discussions we are having here. So, like I mentioned, that Osama bin Laden, in his fight and in his pursuit to counter any superpower in that particular region, and to only have the case of Islam, he went in Afghan with the money from his family business, the construction ideas, and his dedication to fight the superpowers. And because at the time USSR was fighting against USA, Laden was supported by USA supported, and the fight against USSR built up. And we know what happened then. 1991 Soviet Union collapse, and before that the pullout from Afghanistan. So that was technically a win of the Mujahideens and the Osama bin Laden led party in the area of Afghanistan. 10 years they were able to push back USSR from that area, and at the same time, Osama bin Laden also started to then build up Al Qaeda's presence across the region of Middle East. So he basically had the philosophy that it was to protect Islam and violently counter superpowers. Now, here's the thing, like I mentioned, the Saudis were getting very much benefits from the alliance which they had with the erstwhile US because of the oil, because of the money which was flowing in. And the way Al Qaeda was positioned, it was positioned, like I mentioned, as a violent counter to the superpowers. So the king of Saudi Arabia did not like that particular angle because they were getting the money. And at that time, Osama bin's passport, that was even taken away from him because they thought that maybe he can become a much of a problematic issue in the future end, and that might lead to, I would say, a breakdown in the relationship between USA and Saudi Arabia. Even when the 1990, the 1990 issue came about when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, at that same time, Saudi's kings was firstly approached by Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden said that he can take his men in this particular area and he can come counter the men of Iraq. But they did not wanted the presence of Osama bin Laden in that particular area, and they once again took the help of USA at that time to counter Saddam Hussein, who was entering the area of Kuwait. So that's how the build up, the frustration of Osama bin Laden started to keep on increasing and increasing and increasing. When the 1990 issue of Kuwait came about, at that particular time, the king then sought the help of USA. Dick Cheney at that time was the main head of USA. He came to counter attack the Iraq, and they went gun blazing. And the friendship between the Saudi Arabia and the king USA, that's started to increase. But that's how initially this build up happened about. But once again, because Osama bin Laden had his frustration with USA, the final 9/11 then disaster struck. A targeted attack in the USA happened. The Twin Towers collapsing, the attacks on the Senate being trying. It was a huge, I would say, uh, disaster and the worst attack which USA had seen on its own land. And that's where the impact and the story of Middle East somewhere or the other started to increase more and more in the case of USA's presence in the Middle East. So this was the initial build-up, I would say. We had the element of Iran, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, then the case of Saddam Hussein, and then the mention of Kuwait. I know the story is somewhere or the other differentiated a lot right now because there were too many characters, but this is how initially the build-up has happened. Now, to consolidate some of the things which I mentioned, firstly, I would like to mention the case of Iran Iraq. So, going back to the map once again now, this is now going to be a long map study. So, this particular area, Middle East. So far, it's just the basic, I would say, the players, the characters which are in this story. The top one being the USA, the top one being Iran, it being Saudi Arabia, it being Israel, it being Afghanistan. Another character which I introduced here was Saddam Hussein. Kuwait was mentioned, and that's how the initial story is building up. This was just, I would say, a trailer, and yeah, it's a bit of a chaos of a trailer. Now coming to the main story. So in the 1979, when Iran was taken over by the Ayatollah Khamenei and his co, the IRGC as a unit established the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, and at that time, the military of Iran was initially disbanded because the military of Iran was supported by the Shah of Iran, the Reza Shah Pahlavi. So at that time, the main force of Iran was the IRGC. The military men of the Iran had been jailed, and Iraq at the time was ruled by Saddam Hussein. So Saddam Hussein at the time was ruled by Iraq when the 1979 revolution came by. And here is how the things evolved. So 1979, the Iranian revolution happened, and post that the Ayatollah Khamenei and the supreme leader of the Iran, he and its IRGC wanted to spread this revolution across the West Asia. In general, whenever revolutions come by, they are more, I would say, in the case of national interest. However, for the case of Iranian revolution, it was meant to go beyond the borders of Iran, and it was seen, I would say, as a fear by Iraq, who had Saddam Hussein at the time. He feared that the Shia community in Iraq might start to raise up against him. Saudi Arabia, kingdom, they saw that maybe if Iran's monarchy has been removed and clergy and the religious people have come about, maybe same thing can happen in Saudi Arabia. Bahrain was at that time tense. Jordan was tense at that time. So it was, I would say, a chaos in the overall area of Middle East. And Iraq at that time, with the Saddam power, thought thought that if they can at this time attack Iran, firstly they would be able to get hold of the Iranian oils. They would be much and more able to access the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, and it would further increase their own base of revenue, power of money. So at that time, finally, Saddam Hussein, he attacked Iran. He attacked Iran in 1980, thinking that this would be the best time to attack Iran because Iran's military has been disbanded. It's in jail. It's a new country. It's a developing country. Not much is, I would say, going in the as he thought. And yeah, it could be the best time to attack them. And like I mentioned, Saddam Hussein, Iran. Saddam Hussein saw there was a fear. So majority of the countries like Saudi Arabia, the Kuwait, the Qatar, and even the other countries of Jordan, they thought that this could be the best time to support Iraq because if Iran is countered, it would be better off for the rest of the countries. So a full support was given to Iraq by the countries of Saudi Arabia. And when USA saw that Saddam Hussein is fighting up against Iran, they also very much helped the case of Iraq. Yes, the very own Saddam Hussein, which was deposed by USA in 2003, he was supported by USA at that time because, like I said, it's a world of realism where the policies and where the fun things happen based upon your own interest. So that's how the initial build-up started to came about. And 1980-1988 war started between Iraq and Iran. Initially, it started in this particular area, Basra, where Iraq started to send in their own men in the Iran, and they were somewhere or the other able to take down a large area initially. But the thing is, a common theme which we are even reading right now is Iran is a civilizational state. When you are a civilizational state, you have a national presence, and that national presence somewhere or the other helps to sustain that country even in times of chaos. Yes, Iran had got a damage when the Iran revolution happened and the country transformed, but when the stake and the identity of the country got at stake, each and every, I would say, citizen of the country got united at the time. Iran's IRGC and the command of the clergy, they even, I would say, released the military men out of the jails and they started to and around the 1982 time, they were then very much able to counter back against Iraq. Uh, Interesting fact, which I would like to mention here, the case of once again, terrorism. Israel at that time used to send missiles and weapons and money to both Iraq and Iran. So I have a quote here which reads Israel went both sides. He wanted that the both sides to become weak with ongoing wars. So they even used to smuggle weapons to Iran. And they eventually thought that Iraq might be a much bigger threat under the case of Saddam Hussein. So they initially used to smuggle the weapons to Iran also. That's how I would say the case of realism comes about. It's more to do with the presence, the religion, and the other element. It's more to, I would say, exist and to live ahead. That's how the initial build-up started. Saudi and Kuwait were very much supporting Saddam Hussein at the time. So China supported Iran. Russia at that time, somewhere or the other, was supporting Iraq because they saw Iran's religious presence as an issue in the case of Afghanistan. So that's how the build-up started to take place. 1981, the stalemate initially built up, where the Ayatollah Khomeini wanted war as a scapegoat now for power centering. He thought that if the war can now further go up ahead, if finally can get a win, he will be able to consolidate his power post the removal of the king. And at that time, USA went full guns on blazing to support Saddam Hussein. They gave him intelligence, they gave him satellite movements, and they basically wanted a status quo in that particular region. They did not wanted a new power to come about. And that has been, I would say, since the past and even right now, where many a times if a change has appeared in a country, the big powers they would want a status quo. They would want things to go in their own way. That's how the build up, the initial, I would say, help and the assistance from the side of USA came to Iraq. Another key important fact here was this particular region of Kurds. So Kurds identity, which was supposedly to be given a region with the name of Kurdistan. Kurdistan of Syria, somewhat region of Iraq, somewhat region of Iran, and somewhat region of Armenia. So that's something of a big area which the Kurds were supposed to have. But like I said, the way the Britishers divided the land, Kurds got distributed into five territories, with each five territories now fighting for their own existence and for their own rights. And in whichever country they were part of, they were basically a minority. So at that time, Iraq's Kurd, they basically wanted a reason to move away from Iraq. So they started to support Iran at the time. When Iran started to send in their own troops from this particular route of Quds, the Kurds of Iraq, they favored the case of Iran. And at that time, heavy bombing happened in this particular border region. Saddam Hussein was a very cruel man. It's been very much recorded in the history that he openly used uh, nerve gas, chemical weapons to counter attack the Quds. And we saw a huge disaster happening about at that particular area, the 1985-1988 time. Huge bombing by the Iraq side, the Saddam Hussein side happened in the case of Quds. Many Quds died permanently at the time. So yeah, I have a data in front of me that the North Iraq, the Kurds, they saw this as an opportunity to break out from the Iraqi regime. But the way Saddam Hussein had the powers in 1983, chemical warfare started, and the use of mustard gas, which was not opposed by anyone, that started to see. That's how I would say the element of religion, sorry, the element I would say of power, and once again the power games happened about because the same chemical weapons, the same weapons of mass destruction which USA mentioned in the 2003 attack, the same when were being used by Iraq to fight against Iran, the Quds. Nowhere of a mention, nowhere of a help was given to the Quds at the time. So that's how the initial issue came about, and even reports came that the money, the tech, the diplomatic power was given by USA to Iraq to build those said chemical weapons. So then 1994, the chaos once again started to build up. Ships were not allowed to move from this particular area. If a Kuwait-backed ship had to go from this area, they would start to use the flag of USA. So that if they're using the flag of USA, Iran would not attack them. Now just try to equate this particular issue to the ongoing conflict right now. The countries are right now are using the flags of China. The flag of China is being used to move from this area. Now this shows how power dynamics and the overall game started about. So the same tanker war which we are seeing right now, tanker wars still seeing in 2026 happened also in the 1980 to 88 war. So that's how the chaos started to build about 1985. Then an interesting once again fact, like I mentioned, the case of realism. So the very own USA, which was supporting Iraq for their own benefits, they started to go in a double dealing. It's a well documented Iran Contra scandal, wherein money and information, money and information was diverted from the US administration to Iraq, Iran, and the purpose was to fund the anti Nicaragua communist counter. So that's how the world of realism looks like. Wherever the benefits are, that's how the issues and the cases would increase. 1988 then saw the biggest disaster of this area, the Halabja town of Iraq, where the Kurds dominated. A huge chemical weapon carpet bombing by Saddam Hussein happened here, and somewhere or the other 5,000 Kurds were killed in a day. This happened somewhere around the case of March, and mustard gas and nerve agent were used here. It came to be known as the Anfal campaign, which ultimately led to the death of some 50,000 to 100,000 Kurds. So that's the disaster when it comes to the case of wars, because countries often then tend to, I would say, escalate things and do whatever they want to do for their own benefits. It's publicly documented how the things happened, and USA knew everything which was happening, but they just turned a blind eye to the ongoing issues. 8 years this war kept on going, and finally, then in July 1988, a US ship shot down a which was coming from the side of Iran. So a civilian airline was coming from the side of Iran, and the USA ship thought that this was an F-16, and they shot down the particular plane. 290 people got dead at that time, and the US president at the time was Ronald Reagan. He apologized himself, but the US administration did not said sorry. The captain of the ship, William C. Roggins, he was given a gold medal after the war ended. So that shows how, I would say, the Middle East has been a problematic issue since past, and the very own border which Iraq wanted to take over, the Basra border, no such thing happened. See, the border was left unchanged. But that's how this issue began, ended, and it all led to the chaos. And what happened further? Saddam Hussein, frustrated as he had debt from Saudi Arabia side and the side of Kuwait, he went on to attack the Kuwait in 1990s, and that's where the first Gulf War came about. USA went to help Saddam Hussein because Saudi Arabia did not allow Osama bin Laden to go up against Saddam Hussein, and a 143-day war led Iraq devastated, and they pulled out of Kuwait that time in the area of 1990. So that's how the initial, I would say, build up happened. Now, coming back to the case and moving up further ahead, we take the Iraq angle well and final, and then proceed up ahead to Saddam Hussein. So, like I mentioned, 9/11 happened. Now, this is basically a case of how a war started in this particular region. A war was fabricated. So, 9/11, a very unfortunate incident happened. Many at the time, it was the first time, I would say, US got to see the pains and the horrors when it comes to the case of global terrorism and against global terrorism. But to go up against many people, they wanted a plan and they wanted a target at that time, and a target which they zoned in. The big powers, the big guys who were talking about, they targeted down to the case of an invasion and an attack on Iraq. Uh, I have a quote in front of me from the Secretary of Defense of USA, who said, "We need to bomb something else to show that we are big and strong and not going to be pushed around." Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, he quotes, I'm repeating this again. He said, "We need to bomb something else to show that we are big and strong and not going to be pushed around." And at that time, they started to see how they can build up a case of a war against Iraq, how the global fight against war and terrorism could start. Now, the thing is, you can't just sell a war to the people and start to bomb. You need some concrete reasons to build the case of war. And the way things happened, it was a bit of a messy, I would say, events. The thing is, Iraq was shown as having weapons of mass destruction. At nowhere or the other end, I'm saying or I'm claiming that Saddam Hussein was a good guy. He was a terrible guy who bombed his own citizens for the gain of his own, I would say, money, for his own pride. No one should be allowed, I would say, to build up a regime where they're allowed to kill their own people. And yes, someday or the other, he would have to be taken down. But the way USA entered Iraq and the aftermath which happened in the case of Iraq, US men dying, Iraqi civilians dying, that was something which could have been avoided, but a disaster was meant to happen and the disaster happened. So at the time, the big people which were in the case of USA, the Mr. Bush, Dick Cheney, Powell, Rumsfeld, they started to build the case of weapons of mass destruction. The American people were convinced in the name of 9/11 that yes, terrorists are here and we need to attack. The case of nuclear weapons, the anthrax, the nerve gas was shown to the people, and the attack finally began. And in 2002, 57% of the people were saying yes to the war. yes, to the war against Iraq and the Afghanistan issue also. So once they had made the story straight for the case of 9/11, sorry, the case of Iraq war, the next thing which they wanted was to get to the side of the Senate to approve, to get an approval from the Congress and then the approval from the overall UN community. So in the Congress also, a national intelligence estimate was forwarded by the CIA, which was delivered to present a case on how the war should be carried out and why the war should be carried out. I'm no expert when it comes to the case of defense analysis, so just quoting the things which I have in front of me. And it had been said that this particular estimate, which was forwarded in the case of Congress, it was a rushed, politicized, and an old info intelligence. CIA had the information from back in 1988 and the 1990 era, and that's how the initial things and the information was piled up, and that's how we saw the Iraq war being justified. In the case of UNSC, UN inspectors went at a particular area, and they at that time concluded that maybe there is some issue with respect of accounting for the chemical weapons, and that particular, I would say, claim was taken up by USA to then further said that yes, Iraq is hiding weapon. So the Secretary of State of USA, Colin Powell, he quotes in UN that Iraq is hiding weapons. They have solid evidence for that, and that's why the war by USA began. So that's how the global, I would say, war against USA started. Thousands of army men of USA unfortunately died in this particular region. Half a million civilians got dead. And what was the ultimate conclusion? No nuclear weapons, no chemical weapons were found here, and there was no link of Osama and Iraq being directly interlinked somehow. And even the Secretary of State, Mr. Colin Powell, he admitted that this was a mistake of data representation. If I can even quote and find the same thing, that Colin Powell agrees that Iraq war was his mistake of data representation. Yes. I, of course, regret the UN speech that I gave, which became the prominent representation of the case. But we thought it was correct at the time. The president thought it was correct. So that's what I feel happens whenever the issue comes about. And I think uh, this, I would say, uh, was somewhere or the other a building up, I would say, of a disaster itself. The thing is, see, your country has been bombed, and yes, somewhere or the other you have to show the world then that you are not, I would say, a cowardice nation. But the way things projected and the way things happened, it could have been very much avoided, because that heat of the moment in which this particular issue built up, it led to a chaos for this particular region, and this particular region is still suffering from the said issues. We still see how things somewhere or the other have impacted this particular area. People and men are dying still here. The issue of the Middle East still build ups, and somewhere or the other, when Saddam Hussein died at the time, what biggest happened here was that a centralizing power died. The thing is, whenever a centralized power dies, other small powers, and that's the reason why further the Al Qaeda, the ISIS, they were able to take over this area of Iraq and Syria. So that's how I would say the initial case of the Iran and Iraq, and then the US about Quds is something which I had covered up. And to give a bit of a context and confirmation, yes. So if I can show here a map of Kurdistan, once again, like I mentioned, the facts which I am presenting in front of myself, in front, these are just, I would say, a consolidation of the facts which I have read. Nothing is my opinion so far. The only opinion I have is that it's, I would say, a bad state of affairs that such thing would have to happen, because no country deserves to get bombed. India has been someone infected by the case of terrorism since long. Pakistan, an unfortunate neighbor which we have, has conducted so many terrorist operations in our country. And yes, the frustration was very much visible at the end of the USA, and that's how the issue started to build up. So this is how the Kurdistan maps look like. It's divided in the countries of Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Iran, and Armenia. And it's a country, it's people which are yet to, I would say, get their own state of freedom and this set of, I would say, independence and their own rights, because they are carved across multiple countries, with each country using these militias and the people for their own benefits. So that's the case of Quds also here. Uh, so yeah, that's the initial element of Iran covered. Sorry, Iraq covered, Saudi Arabia covered, Afghanistan covered, Saddam Hussein done, and the Quds part. Now coming to the case of Israel, Iran, and a Palestinian angle. That's, I would say, a very uh, comprehensive story here. And one of the biggest reasons why I mentioned that the issues which we see today are as a result as a result of past mistakes and miscalculations. Just read the word by saying the miscalculation, because the men which were calculated in the war, they finally admit themselves that yes, we regret the UN speech that we gave, which became the prominent representation for our case. But we thought it was correct at the time. The present thought it was correct. Now, if I just pause this here and if I link this to what is happening right now, even Mr. Trump said that Pete is the defense, the Secretary of War and Defense, that you were the one who said me that this war is a legitimate war. I feel that that's the case of misinformation. That's the case of going for the attack before even we have a concrete information in our hand. That's the initial, I would say, case here. Now coming to the Israel, Iran, and Palestine angle, it's a very back in the past, and it has very much less to do with religion before the 1948 and 1950 era started about. So once again, like I mentioned, the context. So Jerusalem here, just a second, if I can have a bit of a rough estimate, yeah, 43 minutes. No question. So yeah. So the thing is, Jerusalem is a confluence of three prominent religions. The three Abrahamic religions have the confluence area: the Christianity, the Islamic, and the Jewish community. They saw their origin from this holy city of Jerusalem. Back time in the 500 BCE, 300 BCE, people of Jewish community had been living in this area of Jerusalem. The first ever recorded persecution of Jews happened somewhere around the case of 30 CE or 136 CE under the Roman Empire. Let me get my words straight once again. It happened under the Roman Empire. Roman people did not had much to do with the case of Christianity or religion, but rather to have the way of a tribal empire. Romans were the tribal people, which wherever they went, they would decimate the countries and the region where they were attacking. So when the Romans started to take over the area of Jerusalem, they did not see this particular element with respect of religion, but as an element of a region. And then they were able to persecute and move out the people of Jewish community from this area. So escaping the threats, escaping the chaos, the people of Jewish community, they started to migrate and move towards. And I would say the first ever recorded evidence of misinformation and hate speech somewhere or the other has to be linked with the case of people of Jewish community. The Jewish community people were very much well educated, and being well educated, they were traders, they were part of the treasury, they were part of the businessmen elite. And whenever some or the other famine or disaster would use stuck by, the first people to get the blame was the Jewish. Jewish people were seen, I would say, at a devilish end by the Christian community. There were rumors, allegations, and conspiracy theories that Jews were the one responsible for the death of Jesus Christ. The anti-Semitism, which saw its peak under the Holocaust era of Hitler, it had its origin in the past too. You would be shocked to know that the same ghettoization which Hitler did in the 1935 to 1945 era, that same ghettoization happened in Italy way back in 15th century already. Or that shows that the persecution of Jewish community has been a topic of debate since long. And so far, no mention of religion, no mention of Islam has happened here. So the case of Islam, when the Islamic community started to dominate the area of West Africa, North Africa, and the area of the Middle East, there were two ways in which the community of Jewish people was seen. One was the angle of dhimmi. So dhimmi is basically a second-class citizen under the Islamic community who would have to pay a jizya tax for following their own, I would say, religious rights. If I can link to the case of India here, when the Mughals were ruling India, when the Khiljis were there, jizya was a tax which was applied on Hindus, so that if they are paying the tax, they are then in the protection of the Mughals, and they are allowed to carry on their religious activities. So that was the one way the Jewish community was treated as a dhimmi in the Muslim community. A second way, yes, there was persecution somewhere over the area of Iberian Peninsula in this particular region. Yes, the persecution happened. So two cases of persecution by the so two elements when it came the case of Islam. Now building up towards the 1800s, the 1900s. In the 18, the Jewish community, being well educated, being well anomalous in wealth, they started to lobby a support a Zionism movement to bring back community once again back to the holy land of Jerusalem. They started to talk with the British Empire, started to talk with the USA on some way or the other finding leases, some way or the other finding rights to live in that particular area. Now this started to build up till 1900. At that time, Mediterranean Sea was opened up by the Suez Canal. The British saw it as a perfect opportunity to have the presence here. The Balfour Declaration and the Peel Commission was yes to do with the case of Israel, but more to do with the British in this area. And then finally, in the 1948, the UN Declaration of the Israel-Palestine area saw 55% of the area of Palestine being given to a 30% population of Jewish community, which eventually led to 7 lakh Palestinian people being persecuted and removed from their homes. So just see this tragedy of history. The very own Jewish community which were persecuted from their homes and had to go to Europe. When they are now coming back to the region of Palestine, they are now persecuting the same Palestinians which had nothing to do with the case. So that's the theory by Edward Said when he say this is the classic case of victimization of the victims. That's how the issue evolved. The Arab states saw this as a threat to their own sovereignty and saw it as a breach of trust by the British community. The way their Arab friends, the Palestinians, were removed from this area, that was seen as an against by the communities of Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, this particular area of Tunisia, and all those countries. And they started the war. 1948 war happened, 1963 war happened, 1973 war happened, and in all of this war, Iran was nowhere to be seen. Why? Because at the time, Iran was a friend with USA. We had the Reza Shah Pahlavi at the time. So that's when I see the element of religion not being mentioned very much here. Yes, the element of religion is there. We have seen incidents of Iran, Saudi Arabia, sorry, countries like Houthi, sorry, the elements like Houthi, Hezbollah, they mentioning death to Iran, sorry, death to Israel, death to USA. But the initial build-up, the initial frustration was more to do with structural history, more to do with regional angle, which got, I would say, accelerated by the element of religion. And that's the initial history. If you are someone who would like to read more on the same, I can attach my research article on the same, and if you wish to read, you can have a look on the same. So this is that article on the tragedy of history, on how this region is more to do with regional and structural history. It's a very good read, I would say, very much recommended if you are someone who wants a different perspective on this ongoing issue of wars. So control V, I can apply it. Yep. So just a second. Yeah, that's the initial, I would say, build up to this chaos. Now, once again, that we have touched finally the case of Israel, and then yes, the case of Iran has been talked about. See, this particular area of Middle East has very much success when it comes to the case of a peace, mainly because of the frustration, the deceit, and the hatred which the communities have against each other. Uh, when the initial peace deal started to build up between Egypt and Israel after the 1973 war, when the Egypt president signed a peace deal with Israel and the recognition started to build about, in a couple of days, Egyptian president was assassinated, and in the case of Oslo Accords too, which happened after the 1990, the president of the Israel was assassinated. So these assassinations are an evidence that the hatred, the right wing, I would say, politics, the nationalistic, the extreme chauvinism, extreme religious fanatism which had this region engulfed, somewhere or the other has stopped the case of peace. It has been recorded in the past that Mr. Netanyahu has been very much against the case of peace. Since 1995, he has been saying that the only option for Israelis to exist is Iran decimated and each and every Palestinian is removed. He has been somewhere or the other a biggest opposition when it comes to the case of that peace, because you can't just eliminate an entire country, an entire territory from the map, because they also have their own identity, they have their own, I would say, representation, and most importantly, they have their own, I would say, friendship. There are people, there are countries, there are nations which are supporting, why somewhere or the other this issue has accelerated much and more beyond. We saw the issue of unfortunate incident of October 2023 happening about. I had mentioned this in the past also. Nowhere or nowhere in the hell a common sensical guy would say that the 7 October attack was justified. Whatever happened on that day was a sham. Whatever happened was truly and truly uncalled for. You can't just go and attack a civilian people. And what Hamas did that day was the biggest red line that they could have crossed. And the initial response by Israel was very much justified. If I have to take the case of India here, when the Pahalgam attack happened, we were very much justified to attack Pakistan. At every and every end, we were justified, because there can be no tolerance when the element of terrorism and even the case of a state sponsored terrorism comes about. That terrorism is a root of, I would say, all disasters, an unfortunate incident, and nowhere or the other it can be justified. But what happened later on, I would say, was a big escalation. The element which we often mention here is the just war theory. The just war theory says that the war should be justified to the extent at which the war had happened. But the way things happened in Gaza, the way civilians dying, hospitals being attacked, that was something of an uncalled for. Even when India was attacking Pakistan, we did not attack the military bases of Pakistan initially. We targeted their terrorist bases. When their military started to get involved because of the friendship they have, that's the case when we finally attacked the case of military. The no base was attacked, their other areas were attacked. So that's where I would say attack by India happened. That's the case of just for theory. That the response should be proportionate enough to the action. And we all saw then what happened. The issue has been, I would say, building up still now. Chaos has not subsided. The ceasefire has been established between Israel and Hamas. It's yet to, I would say, come towards a conclusion, but let's see how the things would happen. It's a hope which people have that yes, finally, maybe peace can be restored in this particular region. But the way things are looking right now, it doesn't see stability happening, because Iran's in chaos. Maybe they, the Israeli people or the community under the case of Netanyahu, they started to once again bomb Gaza City. It can happen anywhere very easily, because the conditions which have been presented are that Hamas would be disbanded completely, and nowhere right now it's being seen visibly that Hamas would be disbanding. That's the case, I would say, for the Israel issue. We discussed this in the past videos also, so I thought that maybe videos too. So I thought that maybe a bit more of a context on the same. Now I have an interesting, I would say, issue around the case of Hezbollah to discuss. Then the element of Yemen in front of me. So yeah, before I think I can talk, yeah, we can very much talk about that. So yeah, before going towards the case of Hezbollah, the current issue which we see, we often hear the term of axis of resistance and the Brotherhood Alliance, basically the Brotherhood Alliance. So what basically we have here are the Iran, we have Hezbollah. This is not the Turkish guy Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. So Hezbollah is located under Lebanon, and they somewhere or the other dominate the southern portion of Lebanon. Here's a river with the name of Litani River. I don't know if I can trace that river here. Maybe if Google Maps can help me here. Litani River. So Litani River is a border. Yeah, here it's finally, yes, yes, here. So Litani River is a border which I would say demarks uh, Hezbollah's existence, and the other civilian, I would say, administration, and somewhere or the other leads the northern portion of Lebanon. So this south portion is held by Hezbollah, and north portion is held by the Lebanon civilian government. If I can show a map here, Hezbollah territory in Lebanon. Yeah. So this is how it looks like, and till Litani River, they have their influence. And if I can trace the blue line, Lebanon, yeah, it's here. So here it is. So this particular, I would say, line, blue line, which we have here, this is the line which act as a de facto boundary between Israel and Lebanon in the case of Hezbollah issue, and that's been demarcated by the UN. Right now, as the issue progressed in the element of Iran, Hezbollah, in support, basically being the friend of Iran, they started to attack the territory of Israel. And as a counter attack, the way attacks have been accelerated by the Israeli regime on the Hezbollah, it's on a very great level. The infrastructure around the Litani River had been impacted, civilian infrastructure had been impacted, and I think sooner or later, Lebanon's territory of Hezbollah, that would be, I would say, decimated well and beyond which it exists right now, because the attack which we have seen right now is somewhere or the other to its extreme end, which has never been, I would say, seen in the past. And because Iran is right now not, I would say, much supporting towards the case of Hezbollah. So what we would see right now is very much easily that Israel would be taking over the case of Hezbollah, because right now even the civilian government of Lebanon, they are somewhere or the other not much, I would say, sympathetic towards the case of Hezbollah, because it was a useless attack of Hezbollah to come right now and bomb Israel when the issue was happening. And I think being dragged in an undue war, or it's been a disaster for the case of Lebanon since past. So that's the element for Lebanon and the Houthis, sorry, the Hezbollah. Hamas, like I mentioned, that's somewhere or the other we have covered in the case of Palestine. So if I can maybe write here. So this is in Lebanon, and this is in Yemen. Houthis have a very, I would say, peculiar, I would say, history. And if I can maybe mention a bit of their history, it's a very complicated map when it comes to the case of Yemen, because there are many, many actors involved here. And when too many actors get involved, too many people get involved, it, I would say, leads to more and more chaos. So Sada and Sana are maybe two regions when it comes to the case of Yemen. And if I can, I would say, give a bit of a context. So Yemen initially was a multiple tribal group community. It initially was, just a second, it was initially divided into North Yemen and South Yemen. And in the 1990, the unification of Yemen started to build about. So what happened then in 1992 was there was a group with the name of Believing Youth, the BY group, the Believing Youth, and they were basically Shiite Muslim. Just when I mentioned the case of Shia, remember Iran. So Iran is a Shia dominated country. Saudi Arabia is a Sunni dominated country. Shias somewhere or the other start to, I would say, make alliances with each other. So that's why Yemen's Houthi, Lebanon's Hezbollah, Palestinians Hamas, and then Iran, they have an alliance with each other. So the Shiite Muslim, the Zaidi community, were the ones which were part of the Believing Youth community here in the Yemen, in the north area of Yemen, and they felt neglected. And initially, what their focus was not in the form of, I would say, a military dominance, rather a formation of a religious identity. And later on, they went on to become a much more militia-led, I would say, identity. A key participant of this Believing Youth member was Hussein al Houthi. So Hussein al Houthi, he was a parliamentarian. He was a leader. He was a parliamentarian in the case of Yemen, but he saw the influence of Saudi Arabia, the attacks, and the influence of the Sunni-dominated Saudi Arabia as a issue and a problem for the case of the Shia community in Yemen. And he left parliament in the 1990s and he joined the Believing Youth community. Like I mentioned, Hussein al Houthi, he wanted Iranian revolution like incident where there was no intervention by the foreign powers, and he wanted the President Salah to fight against Saudi Arabia. The president at the time of Yemen was President Saleh. It's a bit of a complicated history, so I'm trying to use my notes here. So yeah, finally the notes are open now. Then 2001 happened, 9/11. 9/11 was, I would say, a very pinnacle in the geopolitical history because a calculated attacks and a precision-led attack in USA shocked the world entirely. See, basically, that war happened, people got scared. When it comes to the case of terrorists, is fear. What they want is to instill fear in the eyes, in the minds of the people. The horrific attack which happened in 26/11 in India, the 9/11 attacks of USA, the Pahalgam issue, the Uri strikes, then the solo attacks in Germany, England, and other wells. What these attacks basically serve is a purpose of fear. And that fear was very much, I would say, instilled in the minds of the entire world because the way the 9/11, the Twin Towers collapsed, the chaos happened, it was seen by everyone. And at that time, visibly shaken USA and the visibly shaken world, yes, the global war on terrorism had to bring about. And at that time, Al Qaeda was having their presence even in Yemen. And President Saleh, he allowed USA at that time to come in uh, Yemen and counter the case of Yemen. So just link it to the case of Osama bin Laden. Saudi Arabia not took help of Osama bin Laden to fight against Saddam Hussein. They invited in USA. They did not like Osama bin Laden did not like that. Same happened in the case of Yemen. President Saleh did not took up Al Houthi to counter the Al Qaeda. They brought in USA, and he saw this was wrong, and that's where the group support started to increase. They did a brutal protest in 2004 against the President Saleh, and at that time Al Houthi, and that's when the transition of believing youth as a student-led religious identity transitioned towards a Houthi rebel community. Uh, it became a symbol of anti-imperialism, and the conflict went international as they started to unleash attack even against the Saudi Arabia. In 2009, the first attack began, and at the same time, there was a secret alliance between Iran and Houthis being signed about. So that's how initially this started to build about. The Al Qaeda, which was in Saudi Arabia, having had been decimated by the Saudi Arabia and the USA, they went in the Yemen, and it came to be known as AQAP, Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. And this was actually one of the most dangerous version of the Al Qaeda community. And they were against both Houthi and against Saleh. And then once again, USA's influence started to build up at the same time. In the same time, incident which caught the eyes of many communities, and the reason why President Saleh thought that if I am not stepping in or not doing a particular action, my own life would be in trouble. Something which happened at that time was called an Arab Spring. It was a movement which started in 2011 in Tunisia, Tunisia, when Mohammed Bouazizi, he self-incarcerated himself in front of the office of Tunisia in 2010 December, and that's how the Arab Spring with the Jasmine Revolution in Tunisia built up. So Arab Spring was basically seen as a revolution where the dictators of the Arab community, they were to be deposed of, and a democratically elected government which was in the favor of support of the people and their rights would be established. So That's here we have Tunisia. So the bells of the Arab Spring reign here when Mohammad Bouazi he self incarcerated himself in front of the office of Tunisia, and that's how the revolution spread. Tunisia's government at that time fell down, and different say base came about. So in 2007 or 2011, this happened. This spread even to Egypt. Massive protests came about in the case of Egypt. It was called the Lotus Revolution here, and the president was ousted. So yeah, somewhere or the other, this particular revolution started to be seen as a way of the people to fight against anarchy. They had massive protest. They ousted their president, and this particular revolution was called the Lotus Revolution for somewhere or the other named under the case of flowers only, Spring Revolution. Libya at that time fell down. We all know how Gaddafi was killed. Gaddafi out. Gaddafi, Libya is here. Yeah, Libya here, and then in Yemen, I would touch about this just in a while. Spoiler alert: 2012, President Saleh he was ousted out. Then Bahrain, we saw something called the Pearl uprising, but not much beneficial. Syria against Bashar al-Assad, once again, it was not much successful there. But it did, I would say, instill fear in the minds of these dictators. Mainly Tunisia, I would say, got, I would say, a bit of a help where the things came about. But in general, what happened in the end of Arab Spring was an Arab winter, because what we saw was instability, economic decline, and return of authoritarianism here. Because, like I mentioned once again, if you remove a central power and you don't have a competent individual to come and rise, the small communities would go for a toss, they would go for a revolution, and things would escalate. So coming back to the case of Yemen once again, so seeing the issue happening about and the Arab Spring accelerating, stepped down, and at the time a new president came about. He was President Hadi. He was backed by Saudi. So because he was backed by Saudi, he was not recognized by the in the Yemen. 2014, they were able to take down the capital of Yemen, Sana'a, and key mention here is the Saleh, President Saleh, who had left presidentship and had moved away from the overall scene. He joined Houthis at the time, and when he joined Houthi, he brought in his own forces with him. Then once again, the issue started to increase. President Hadi at the time had to flee and go in Saudi Arabia, and he was somewhere or the other then controlling the community from the rule from there only. And that's how the initial issue started to further build up and build up and build up. 2015, then we have the Operation Decisive Storm. Saudi Prince at the time, Mr. Mohammed bin Salman, he wanted to counter Yemen once and all, and he took the help of USA. Cluster ammunition was given by USA to Saudi Arabia, and they also went up against AQAP, the Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. So that's how the Indonesia started to building about. USA came here, they were able to counter AQAP, ISIS was able to take down. They went even from this particular area of Eden, USA, and they were somewhere or the other able to push back the community of the Houthis back to north area, because at the time initial south area, this particular area, this had been taken down by the Houthis. I had a map here. So yeah, this particular area had been taken at the time by the Houthis. But when that pushback started about 2017, once again Saleh, the Prince Saleh, he switched sides because Saudi and UAE offered him, I would say, a much better deal. He became the president again, but unfortunately, finally that saga of going back and forth finally ended. He was killed by the Houthis, and then 2017-18, Mr. Trump came about. He bombed Al Qaeda and ISIS more, and that's how the issue started to build up more and more and more. UAE at the time, seeing its own interest, started to support another group because they somewhere or the other did not wanted Saudi Arabia to be the victors here. So something called the Southern Transitional Council started to build up, which made their own state in the south area. That's how this particular issue kept on building. 2021, Yemen had 70 to 80% of the area controlled by Houthis. Finally, 2022, the ceasefire came by the UN, and then the diplomacy events have been continuing. Houthis came in news once again last year when the issue around Israel-Iran build up. The Gulf of Aden Sea was being bombed by the Houthi pirates. So that's how Yemen was in news. It's a very complicated history. I've tried my best to be as I would say a simple and non-complex as much I can. So that's the case of Yemen here. And now that we have talked about Red Sea, so I think if I can do a bit of a discussion on the states of the world, because this is linked with what we see today. So some of the top states which we have today, and I can if give a bit of a context for each and every state, because I think the Middle East is a never-ending topic, and somewhere or the other, I think yeah, I have completed the main topic. So if I can now talk about these states, so what we have is the state of Hormuz, then we have the state of Babel Mandab, then we have the region of Cape of Good Hope. I think if I can add the word here, choke point of world, and then we also have the Panama Canal, we have the Malacca Strait, we have the Gibraltar, Gibraltar. Spelling, please forgive me. Then we have the Bosphorus Strait. Then we have the Dardanelles Strait. We have the North Sea Straits. We have the Bering Strait. That's, I would say, somewhere or the other, some of the most important, I would say, straits and the choke points which we often hear. Firstly, what's the definition of a strait versus an isthmus? So, isthmus, if I can have a photo here. So, like we have here the Strait of Hormuz. So, Strait of Hormuz here, see the term strait. Strait is basically that source of water and area which basically divides or demarcates between two other water bodies. The Strait of Hormuz basically divides the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. Coming to the Strait of Bab al-Mandab, Strait of Bab al-Mandab separates Gulf of Aden from Red Sea. That's the case of straits. Then comes the isthmus. Isthmus basically is that portion of land which connects two land masses. So here is Panama. Panama Canal, basically the Isthmus of Panama, it basically connects the North American land piece with the South American land piece. Or that's the broad definition for strait and isthmus. If I can add a context there for the benefit of all. Yeah, so that's the case of strait, and that's the case of isthmus. And that's something which you can use, I would say, for a basic, quick definition. Now coming to the importance of the states and why these have been so much important. If I can add a photo here, it would be of a very good, I would say, help for everyone here. So just give me 1 second. Just 1 second. I don't know if I can add a photo here. Copy, paste. Yeah. So I think I have added the photo. It's not showing yet. Why is it not showing? Just a second. I don't know why this is happening. Just 1 second. Not getting that photo of mine. If I can have it quickly, it would be of great help for me. Yeah. So just 1 second. Here it is. Copy image and oh yeah, it's added. Okay, no worries. So here is that particular, I would say, map. Sorry, a photo which I wanted to show some of the important states and how the majority of trade and how the contours are happening about. So the state of Hormuz, which we often read, and in general, the trades which we are reading, somewhere or the other, 10 to 20% of the trade would be going from these particular areas. So to give a bit of a context on the state of 1 second. Yeah, it's cool. ठीक है, कोई नहीं. ठीक है. So yeah, Strait of Hormuz, here it sits between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. Then coming to the and this particular, I would, like I mentioned in the past also, it's a major choke point for the oil coming from this particular region with Qatar, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia, Dubai sitting in, becomes a crucial point of trade here. Another crucial such strait is the Paul Mandab Strait. It's somewhere located here, and it's between the Red Sea and the Gulf of Eden. The majority of the trade of China and even in the case of Europe, it happens from this particular area only. So in the last year, the issue of Houthis started to became a big of a problematic issue for the entire world. Cape of Good Hope, it's here. We have this particular area from where the traveling happens in the past, and if the option of both the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf close, that's the only option we have. That's here. Strait of Gibraltar, it connects the Atlantic Ocean with the Mediterranean Ocean, and that's an entry point for the trade from the Latin America and North Europe. Coming to the Dardanelles Strait and the Bosphorus Strait. So Dardanelles Strait is located here, somewhere or the other. This is the mystery of Marmara. This is the Bosphorus Strait, like I mentioned, and somewhere or the other, we have the Dardanelles Strait also. If I can show you Dardanelles Strait, Turkey. वहीं पे थी वो. Here's Dardanelles Strait. So that's some crucial states in this particular area of Europe. If then I can take you Asia. Here we have the Malacca Strait, a big choke point for China because, like I mentioned, the majority of trade of China would happen from this particular area only. Another option, if they would have, it would be going all the way around from here, just increasing the tax and the cost of the trade. Then the Panama, a topic which I've discussed in deep, I would say, and in the past too. Panama, it's a marvel of, I would say, civil engineering to cut down an entire island and then cross through ships. So yeah, it's a marvelous discovery. And then the Bering Strait. It's a, I would say, a big of a topic which has been in the news since a long time. And with the advent of climate change going on more and more and more and more, I feel this topic is going to be in the news for a while, a lot. And with Russia having the potential to crush the sea ice with the nuclear powered sea cruiser this have, this is the issue which will be in a fear for the USA for times to come, and the issue of Greenland once again to pronounce about. That's the basic, I would say, states in the news, and then the element of once again the West Asia. What we have right now is somewhere or the other of impasse. Peace is yet to come by. I don't see how peace is coming right now because Iran, nowhere or the other, looks like someone who is gonna surrender the way things have been happening. And even it came the case of Israel, Israel nowhere or the other is gonna stop till it is confirmed to them then that the fear and the, I would say, issues around the nuclear capacity of Iran is not decimated. What USA has right now is some kind of a flexibility because their definition of victory here is peace. Peace could mean Strait of Hormuz opening up, regime change. That's something which is not going to happen. It does not seem to be happening right now because of the way the Iranian administration is concentrated, and it looks like right now. Coming to the case of missile system, USA has nothing to fear for the US landmass because even at the maximum extent of 4,000 kilometer, what the Iranian missiles can cover is the area of England and not USA. So for USA, there's a flexibility, but for the case of Israel, there's no flexibility. There are terms and definitions which they want to be completed before the war can be ended. So what we have right now is an impasse. What we have right now is a stalemate, and with the 5 days of hiatus being announced by Mr. Trump, let's see how the things would evolve. So I think that's it for today. Today's topic was much more of a historical topic than it was an opinion based, which we have done so far. So yeah, it has been a new try, new experiment of a history lesson and not opinion. I think an opinion lesson is something which we have been talking about since long. So yeah, I can cover it up very much in one of the next videos. So thanks a lot, I would say, for tuning in. Yeah, I think it got a bit of a boring with the facts, but that's how I would say history looks like sometimes because the context is the reason for why we are where we are right now. So I hope you enjoy the stream. Uh, Thanks a lot for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Sajan. So yeah. Anyway, thanks a lot. It's been a while. I think I can cover up a video then maybe in the next week or so. Not much to do. The war has been, I would say, accelerating a lot. We have our F1 cancelled in the month of April because the events were to be happen in the Bahrain area and the Saudi Arabia. So thanks to the ongoing issue, yeah, the F1 is cancelled. I think maybe it could be a piece for the Red Bull fans like me and the Max Verstappen fans. We have here Max Verstappen. Let's see how the Japanese race comes by. Suzuka has been, I would say, Max Verstappen's pinnacle. We have the track record of winning in this area since the past 4 years. So I think if a miracle has to happen, maybe the sun god in Japan can favor my boy Verstappen here. So yeah, let's see what happens. Anyways, thanks a lot for tuning in. This was, I would say, a special one for me also to cover up the Middle East finally because uh, having read geopolitics since the past, a topic which I had always wanted to cover up was the element around Middle East and the history of Middle East. So I would say to get finally be able to talk on this to get an opportunity, it feels very well. I am kind of in a news club right now and I don't know how to take a screenshot. So just if I can get context for the same, just a bit second before I end the stream. Screenshot Mac. Shift Command 3. So yeah, I think I finally taken that screenshot. A very messy screenshot. Just 1 second. So yeah, that's the Middle East region finally covered up. It's was a very, I would say, good stream. To be finally able to talk about the topic which I love so much. Finally able to talk about its history and the way things have been happening about. Yeah, it's feels good. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Would come about by some more videos very soon because I have no time finally in my hand. So yeah, thanks a lot for tuning in. If you have any ideas, any suggestions, please do let me know in the comment section below. So yeah, thanks a lot. Stay safe. Let's pray the war ends very soon and stability is returning, because yeah, the chaos has been increasing, civilians have been dying, the stock market has been in a toss, and the industry has been disrupted a lot. So yeah, let's see how things happen. So yeah, thank you. See you soon. Bye. Take care.